The New York criminal case against Donald Trump is probably the only one of the 4 that he is currently facing that will reach the sentencing stage before the November election. 2 of those cases are, of course, federal prosecutions that will likely be shut down by Trump's Justice Department if, it is a big if, Donald Trump is reelected president. And then there's Georgia, a state-level case with prosecutorial independence that the DOJ can't touch and for which Trump cannot pardon himself. Same goes for his New York State conviction. Now, Trump knows all of this quite well, which is why he's doing everything in his power to shield himself from any current or future state-level criminal charges, regardless of whether he wins the election or not. And he is doing it with the help of his own party in Congress, where the Speaker of the House is now considering a bill to give current and former American presidents the option of moving state or local prosecutions into the federal courts instead. Joining me now is Duncan Levin, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. Duncan, you are my legal sensei. Please help me understand. I mean, on its face, it would seem like Donald Trump believes he gets at least a better deal in federal courts than state courts, right? Can you talk about the strategy there?
So much for states' rights, right?
Exactly.
This is, by their thinking, the president or the former president is above the law in all 50 sovereign states in the United States of America. And you could think of all of these crimes that are not federal crimes, that don't bear on a federal question or cross state lines or have anything to do with interstate commerce, just a purely state crime. And I'm thinking, for example, shooting someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue.
Oh, sure.
You know, a local murder case, the local DA's office would not be able to prosecute it anymore. And it would have to be removed somehow to federal court for a federal prosecutor, I suppose, to prosecute where there's no statute available. And you could see where this is going, and it's complete bedlam. And not only is this unlikely to pass the Democratic Senate. But it's unconstitutional.
Well, that was my question.
Because the current state of the law is that a state prosecution, a criminal prosecution, can be removed to federal court if the conduct underlying it relates somehow, it comes under color of someone's federal office and there's some sort of federal defense to it. And you saw this most recently with Mark Meadows.
Yeah.
He tried to remove the election interference case in Georgia to the federal court, saying that this came from his time as chief of staff in the White House, and that got rejected by the federal courts and sent back down to the Georgia state courts. But that's really where this arises. And so I think this really falls more into the category of sort of performative politics than anyone writing this who has any knowledge of criminal law or constitutionality or anything. So
wait, you're saying the House Republican Conference isn't concerned with
shocking, I know,
constitutionality of things? I do wonder, though, when we talk about what levers there are to pull in and around immunity. We're waiting for this big decision from the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah.
And they very well could confer some limited immunity on Donald Trump for certain activities in and around what he did in office and thereafter. I do wonder whether that immunity question could affect any of the state level prosecutions as well.
Yeah, and the real answer is nobody knows, because nobody knows what the Supreme Court's going to do.
Right.
They've taken a long time to sit on this. They haven't ruled yet. We're expecting a ruling, but we don't know. And Mr. Trump is asking for something very broad. He's asking for immunity from criminal prosecution, not only around the activities carried out as part of the core part of his presidency, but this quote-unquote outer perimeter of activity that somehow relates to his presidency but is further removed from it. And I think the answer is probably that it's unlikely to affect the 2 state cases, and really just because of the facts here. Remember, this is something that has actually gotten tested in the New York courts, because when Mr. Trump got indicted, he brought the case to federal court. And he went in front of Judge Hellerstein, who's a federal judge. And among other claims that he made this claim about presidential immunity. And Judge Hellerstein said that Mr. Trump had not presented any evidence at all that hiring and paying your own personal attorney relates to your core constitutional duties, that paying hush money to a porn star relates to your core constitutional duties.
Up for debate in a Donald Trump presidency, but
again,
okay.
Shocking. Or that, covering up a conspiracy to promote your election by unlawful means is part of your core constitutional duties. And the biggest insult you could give to a defense attorney is to say that they didn't even come up with a colorable argument.
Right.
So that means you got nothing.
You didn't even try.
You didn't even try. And so it's and the Georgia case arguably has more to do with his duties because it relates to an election. But even that, you're talking about whether it relates to even remotely relates to his constitutional duties in calling an elected official and having them falsify, election results or pretend that they're electors or come up with fake documents being, fake elector documents. And so I don't think any of this relates to the outer perimeters of what he is arguing here. So it's unlikely to carry any water. But with some of these judges and the Supreme Court these days where they're flying flags upside down, you really just don't know what they're going to rule or how they're going to take it up.
And when they are. I do wonder, as we talk about judges, what you imagine the prosecution in the New York case is going to ask for in terms of sentencing for Trump's 34 felony convictions.
Jail time, period. They're going to ask for jail time, and with good reason. And it's not politics. It's because the case calls out for jail time. And I don't think that's a political statement. I think it's because, and you could argue, look, this is somebody who's lived a law-abiding life for a long time. It's a low-level e-felony. It's his first criminal conviction. It's nonviolent. But you could also argue on the other side, and I think this is the way that the prosecution will see it, and likely the judge, that to the extent that the legislature envisioned an e-felony being punishable by up to 4 years in jail, this is the case that screams out for it. This is the case where the falsifying of business records relates to subverting the election to the presidency. Michael Cohen went to prison for 3 years for basically the same conspiracy. And you could say, well, they're different sovereigns. It was a federal prosecution. This is a state prosecution. And Michael Cohen was not a leader of that conspiracy. Donald Trump was the leader of the conspiracy. Michael Cohen was a henchman there. He was somebody who was carrying out orders. And so if there's parity in sentencing, it calls out for a jail term. But also, this is somebody who's been repeatedly violating the gag order,
which hasn't been adjudicated yet.
Well, and also he's violating it even recently. I mean, in that rambling 33-minute speech he gave, he was railing on Michael Cohen. He didn't mention him by name, but he called him a sleazebag. He was on Newsmax the other day calling the jurors, and the judge is very concerned with what Donald Trump is saying about these jurors. He was, talking about the jurors and how he didn't get a fair trial with them. And so Judge Merchan's been really clear with Donald Trump and saying, if you violate this gag order, you're going to jail. And so he's put him on notice about it. And I think when you put all of this together, it's a case that the prosecution is going to ask for jail time. I think there's a really good chance of it.
Okay, Duncan, please come back on July 11th when we have the sentencing, because I am eager to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you, my friend, for your time.
Thank you, Alex.
Today marked another day with no major decisions from the Supreme Court, where we await several significant rulings ranging from Donald Trump's claims that he is immune from prosecution to the availability of medication abortion. So all of that very much hangs in the air, as do the controversies surrounding Justice Samuel Alito after it was reported that the flags associated with the January 6th insurrection, 2 of those flags, were raised over at least 2 of Alito's homes. The justice blamed his wife for flying one of those flags, saying it came after a very nasty neighborhood dispute. But it was later discovered that the Alitos were flying that flag nearly a month before the fight with their neighbor. And now that neighbor is speaking out.
At best, he's mistaken, but at worst, he's just outright lying. In that interaction, she approached us, started screaming at us, used all of our full names, which to me felt like a threat because you're a stranger. We don't know you. You don't know us. How do you know our full names? And I started yelling, how dare you? Because they both were there at the same time. So I said, how dare you? You're on the highest court in the land. You represent the Supreme Court of the United States. You're behaving this way. You're yelling at a neighbor. You're harassing us. How dare you? Shame on you.
Joining me now is Mark Joseph Stern. He's a senior writer at Slate Magazine covering the courts. Mark, I was very interested in what this neighbor had to say. First of all, because her account differs from that of the justice, which seems significant. But also, there's been a lot of talk about him recusing himself. And today, Justice Alito did recuse himself on a minor case relating to Chapter 11 bankruptcies. Can you talk about the sort of the dissonance there between his desire to recuse him from one case that has nothing to do with the major scandal that surrounds him right now?
Yeah, so Justice Alito is one of a few justices who owns individual stocks and still trades those stocks, as we all discovered when Chris Geidner at Law Dork reported that he had sold off stock in Bud Light during the controversy when Bud Light had a transgender spokeswoman. And he recused himself from a decision today, almost certainly because of his ownership of some individual stock, probably a small amount, a few $1,000s, almost as if to say, yeah, I can do this when I want to, and to remind us that he is not doing it when he doesn't want to, which is in some of the major cases to come before the court, including, as we should keep saying over and over again, Donald Trump's prosecution for crimes relating to January 6th, which he seems hopelessly conflicted on in the legal sense that he should not be sitting on this case. The interview with the neighbor confirmed some information that the Washington Post, the New York Times had previously reported, which is that, as you said, that flag was flying before the conflict reached a boiling point. It really seems indisputable that Martha Ann Alito was supporting Stop the Steal. And when Justice Alito denied that in his letter to Congress, he wasn't just spinning the facts. He was potentially committing perjury in a letter to Congress, which is itself a very serious federal offense.
Does anybody hold him to task for that? Or can Congress?
It certainly seems like Congress isn't going to, or isn't even going to try. The sense I'm getting, and I've been pressing Senate Democrats on this to say, what is your plan here? They are throwing up their hands and saying, look, the election's getting closer. We're trying to confirm judges. That's the message that they're trying to send to the base. Well, maybe we aren't holding Alito to account, but at least we're getting some of these great judges through. And look, to be clear, the judges being appointed by Joe Biden are wonderful. Minorities, women, former public defenders, but they cannot undo the corruption and the ill gains that are being secured by a Supreme Court that includes Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas sitting on cases they have no business sitting on. And so I do see this extraordinary dissonance, not just with Alito's whole story, but with how Democrats are approaching this as though they can make up for their hands-off attitude to the Supreme Court by appointing good people to the lower court. You know, those good people on the lower courts will be reversed every time by Alito and Thomas and their ilk, unless Democrats try to tackle this and impose some real penalties on justices who break the rules that they themselves have claimed to follow.
Well, especially as the court is packing like 4 or 5 terms worth of blockbuster cases into one term. I mean, we're talking right now, there are 29 pending decisions that we're waiting for from this court, I think 16 of which are major cases. The fact that we haven't heard boo about any of those 16, Mark. I mean, how do you read the court's silence right now? The fact that they're going to effectively jam these decisions in the last remaining weeks of June, because the court's out as of July 1, right?
Yeah, well, the Supreme Court sets its own deadline, usually arbitrary, for when they'll finish getting down opinions. It's typically the end of June, at the latest early July. So they are going to pack in so many blockbusters into the next 3 or 4 weeks of news cycles in the hopes, I am certain, of having them get lost to the public as we approach July 4th, especially people start tuning out. And, you know, this is the grand strategy of this court. The conservative justices are greedy for these cases. I want to be clear that they have taken up a bunch of issues they did not need to resolve. They have prematurely waded into major cases because they want to use them as vehicles to shift the law to the right. They are packing in all of these barn burners into a single term, and now they're poised to dump them all on the public in rapid fire succession so that we can barely process one before the next drops. And I think what that means, it's the Friday news dump from hell for the next 3 or 4 weeks. We're just going to keep getting these major decisions and have a limited ability to respond to them. The political branches will have a limited ability to push back in ways that they might be able to, because before they know it, the next one will drop. Guns, abortion, immunity, the environment, it's all going to come flooding the zone, and we're going to struggle to really kind of process it all. And then the justices will flee for the summer and hope that the news cycle just fizzles out.
God, Mark, that's such a cynical assessment of the timing here. And I'm not trying to question you on that, but have we seen, is there anything comparable in recent Supreme Court history in terms of basically waiting to do an end run around the public and the media when you're issuing a really controversial ruling with landmark importance?
No, this is new. As recently as like 5 or 6 years ago, the Supreme Court still had only a handful of blockbusters each term. 10 years ago, maybe 2, maybe 3. It's only been really since Justice Barrett joined the court that they have escalated here, taking on more and more of these huge cases and stuffed them all in for the last couple of weeks of June, sometimes dropping 2 or 3 major ones every day, dropping them a few days in a row so that you really can't focus on it if you're a regular person. You've got a life to live. The Supreme Court is dismantling, say, affirmative action, abolishing student loans, killing the administrative state. It is head spinning and very difficult to follow. And I really do think that it is a strategy. It is not a coincidence. And part of it is the conservatives don't know how long they'll have this supermajority. It could end at any time. You know, health could get in the way, whatever. A scandal could get in the way, although it seems like no scandal could get a conservative to resign.
I feel like the scandal's already gotten in the way, Mark.
But you know, something could change the way the court is constituted, and they want to get it all done now. They learned the lesson when Justice Scalia died in the middle of the term in 2016, and they had to put a bunch of those cases on hold and set those issues aside for a few years because they lost their votes. They don't want that to happen again. And so that is another part of this tactic, is just getting this all done as quickly as possible while they've got the votes. They've got them right now. Who knows how long it'll last, but they're going to get it done.
Speaking of Supreme Court justices enmeshed in scandal, Clarence Thomas, tomorrow is the release of the justices' financial disclosure reports. And I know because you tweeted this out. Fix the Court released a list of gifts the justices have received in the last 2 decades. And wow, the reported gifts for Justice Clarence Thomas, I don't know if you at home can see these numbers here. He's by far and away the person who has received the most gifts, an estimated $2.4 million in reported gifts. And the Fix-A Court estimates he received up to $4 million in gifts. Mark, is there no, I mean, and we just move on? Is that the idea here?
Rather than reiterate how utterly broken our system is, that there's seemingly no accountability for a justice who takes millions of dollars in gifts and then illegally refuses to disclose them, I want to point out some of the other numbers on that chart. Look at some of the liberal justices and the moderate justices. They are not participating in this same racket. Some of these justices, like Souter, look, even Kavanaugh, they only have a few $100s worth of gifts that they've received. They are trying, to some degree, to play by the rules while they watch their colleagues flout those same rules. And the point I want to make is that it is possible to serve as an ethical justice. It is possible to say these are the guidelines that both Congress and the judiciary itself have set, and I'm going to work within them. Clarence Thomas has decided he is above those rules and quite literally above the law, and that really does set him apart. I think even from someone like Sam Alito, who comes in second, a distant second, having accepted many gifts from billionaires, but it's still not on the scale of Thomas. And so what this shows is that Thomas is in a league of his own when it comes to this kind of corruption.
Yeah, I would say Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito are in mutual leagues of their own. Different ways, different justices, same court. Mark Joseph Stern, thank you again for your time and incandescent rage about what is a broken court. I thank you, my friend, for joining me tonight.
Thanks so much, Alex.